hundreds, I beg your pardon, of demonstrators gathered in the Ghanaian capital, Accra, on Saturday for a third day of anti-government protests linked to economic hardship that has led to dozens of arrests. Protesters, some waving placards or the Ghanaian flag, decried the high cost of living and the lack of jobs as they marched under the watch of riot police. The country has been battling its worst economic crisis in a generation, brought on by spiraling public debt. Economic crisis and the worsening cost of living in the last 5 years have sparked mass upset in Ghana. Ghanaian police detained 49 demonstrators. Among those held by police were activists and some journalists who were covering the protests. Now let's stay on this story for a bit as we're joined by Mutaru Muqthar, Executive Director, West Africa Center for Counter-Extremism. Thank you so much for joining us, Muqthar.
Thank you.
All right, now, can you tell us how bad is the economic situation in Ghana?
Well, like you mentioned in your introduction, the economic situation in Ghana has gone very bad in the last, 3 years. You're talking about issues relating to cost of living. Inflation is at an all-time high in the last 20 years. We're looking at 43% of inflation. We are looking at very high interest rates hovering over 36%. And so the economic hardship reality here, it's a very, very big thing. And so the protest that you're seeing is a manifestation of the reality of the harsh economic reality Ghanaians are facing at the moment. And so it's not surprising that we're seeing different groups of people agitating, looking to engage in strike actions and demonstrations.
All right, Muqthar, can you tell us more about the situation of things in terms of living conditions of the ordinary citizens?
Well, the situation is really dire. Ghana is known to have very high level of stability, economic stability, political stability. But the economic front in the last 3 years has been very dire. If you're looking at the cost of food prices have gone very high. Some of this have doubled, have tripled, over 300% in terms of increases in prices. Rent is a huge situation now, especially in urban centers. We're looking at transportation prices have gone very high. Fuel costs, the pump stations. In this year alone, we've had over 4 times in terms of the increment that have taken place. And so it's affecting nearly every single thing in terms of the cost of living here. And so it's a huge economic situation that we are facing. I think what has kept Ghana relatively stable or intact is the culture of adjusting. People seem to adjust to the situation as it gets worse. And so it's an element that often is not talked about, but it's the reality of the situation here. And that is why we have seen this strike happen in the way it has happened. And in fact, in the last 3 days, we've seen a lot more voices that are supportive of the strike, the protests organized by the Fix the Country demonstrators.
Okay, now taking a look at everything that's going on in Ghana and all that you have said, can you tell us some of the responses from the government, that's if there's any, to what the masses are actually protesting about?
Well, the responses have been, woefully inadequate in terms of responding to the challenges of economic crisis. We haven't seen any significant government action relating to how this would be addressed in the short, medium, and long term. Because a lot of people have been calling for, cut down in public expenditure, the budgetary allocation to certain sectors of the economy, especially expenditure. The government payroll should be cut or have at least. We haven't seen that kind of adjustment from the side of government. There's still a huge, payroll of the government. We have seen a lot of, flagship programs and projects that are still ongoing. and, just defy what the public has been talking about. So we haven't seen much. And if you relate the aspect of the protest, we have seen deliberate actions by the state through the security agencies seeking to, limit or restrict actions like that. Like we saw on the 21st of this month, when this current protest was meant or scheduled to take place, a day before, the police had gone to the court, asking for injunction to stop this protest from proceeding, when in actual fact, they had been notified a month earlier, and nothing had been done until just a day before. And it was intended to restrict or prevent this strike action from going on. It is a very known popular tactic used by security agencies, by the politicians through the state agents, the security agencies, to stop protests and actions that can make governments look unpopular. Unfortunately, this was counterproductive because the strike action, the court injunction that was intended to prevent them from striking wasn't effective, wasn't successful. So the protesters started the protest on the 21st of this month, that is on Thursday, and the police sought to stop them from protest. And that is where you saw about 50 of them being arrested. Unfortunately, the backlash from the local population was huge, which eventually led to the release of this suspect, which eventually led to massing up and regrouping of the protesters, with more and more citizens joining in on Friday. And yesterday was significantly much more massive in terms of the turnout there. But for the police action, this protest would have received very, very little traction and visibility within the public space. But you can see that government action in itself has been counterproductive and is making things much more, dire in terms of public frustration against the state.
Mutaru, now staying on those who have actually been arrested, we actually know that some of them are actually journalists. Has there been any word from authorities about the arrests and if they will be released anytime soon?
Well, from what we have now, all those who were, subsequently identified as journalists, either as local journalists or foreign journalists, were, released. So at the moment, we do not have a record of any of the journalists who are in detention. In fact, the other protesters who were arrested have been granted bail. And so we don't have records of any of those other, any other citizen under arrest or in detention. And so these things, they are tools and tactics that are meant to frustrate and prevent these kinds of strikes from proceeding. Unfortunately, it hasn't helped in this instance.
All right, well, thank you so much for your insight on this particular topic. Mutaru Mumuni Muqthar, Executive Director, West Africa Center for Counter-Extremism. We appreciate you for your time.
I appreciate that too.